Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home.
Greetings, Karen.
Hey, Dan.
It is the end of the school year for the kids.
Yes, it is. And the teachers. So congratulations to both of those groups. Enjoy your summer.
And we will keep working.
Right? Being 12-month faculty is exciting, isn't it, Dan?
It's interesting.
We don't get those nice summers off.
Technically, Karen, I'm considered staff. So you get special perks over there, huh?
Oh. Yeah, it's interesting how extension varies across the states. You know, that there's some of them are faculty, some of them are tenure track faculty, some of them are staff. I mean, it's weird how it varies so much. But one thing that is a constant is that extension is there, which is an awesome resource for all of you listeners out there, because you can just reach out to your local extension office and get some answers.
Yeah, I'm sure the listeners out there really aren't they might be a little curious about admin and bureaucracy of extensions and land grants across the country, but I think they're tuning into the extension mission in general, which is to help land grant university-based states bring the research back to the counties that the extension educators / agents are in, and just fulfill that research-based informative aspect of extension.
Right. And that's Extension's role, is to bring the knowledge and findings of the universities out to the public where they can be put into action. And so we work with special interest groups, we work with farmers, we work with gardeners, we work with healthcare providers, we work with schools, we work with community support networks, we work with so many different organizations. And just like every university has a different way they title their extension, every county is going to have a different feeling for their extension, and their extension is going to do something slightly differently. And a lot of that is based on local need. And so that's the great fun thing about extension, is that we can respond to those local needs in a way that fits that local area. But what it all comes back to, though, is that we are part of the land grant universities, and therefore any funding that gets cut from the universities also gets cut from extension. And so if you do love extension, please reach out to your local politicians and let them know that you support the land grant university mission and you want to see extension survive. So let them know that you value us, and that's really helpful to help keep us going, because your taxpayer dollars do help to support extension in a very big way, and we thank you for that.
All right, now transitioning from that.
Sorry, we're going through a little bit of a budget crunch here, so money's on my mind.
I can hear it. Yeah. So I'm sorry, Karen. Well, let's talk about the fun stuff in extension.
Yeah, let's go to the fun stuff. What should we talk about, Dan?
Let's talk about an activity that we did a week or two ago, depending on when you're listening to this show, I guess. But on May 20, we had a Pawpaw Conference, the Ohio Pawpaw Conference, in collaboration with the Ohio Pawpaw Grower Association, which are also affiliated with the North American Pawpaw Growers Association. But we kind of combined the association input along with, a lot of the industry leaders in there with some of the research coming out of Ohio State involving pawpaws. And very nice conference. It was on a Saturday. It was in Columbus at Ohio State. We did it at the 4-H Center, and we toured the orchard planting that we have there. It's 6 years established. We also toured some processing facilities, kind of discussing some of the limitations of fruit processing and how we're trying to make that better and easier. And also we discussed the marketing aspect of pawpaws. Very interesting fruit. But again, great conference. And today for this show, I just figured we would kind of touch on some of the stuff that we talked about and also kind of touch on just generalities of pawpaws.
Yeah, and pawpaws are such a cool plant too because they have these really long leaves, and the fruit it's kind of like a custard that's all wrapped up in a fruit shell. It's a very soft fruit. In dendrology, we called it the West Virginia banana.
Yeah. So actually, let's get to that a little bit. It's funny because, you look up the USDA fact sheet on pawpaws, which I'm kind of looking at right now, and they give you, for the alternative names, there's a paragraph of things. And I just want to go through them because it does kind of, those alternative names are very descriptive. So if you've never had a pawpaw, here are some of the names that it's known by. It's the false banana, the pawpaw apple, custard banana, poor man's banana, banana tree, Indiana banana. I tried saying that so many times. Nebraska banana, the Hoosier banana, Michigan banana, the white plum. I've heard it being called the Appalachian banana as well. And okay, so it's not really related to the banana.
Not at all.
But it is fairly related. We'll say they say cousins, I think, which I'm not exactly sure how close that is, but there's a relationship with mangoes. And what's interesting about the pawpaw is because it has that mango relationship, it's hardy in growing zones 5 through 8. Most of the plants in that association are mainly tropical. So you do have this mango banana flavor in the pawpaw, and it's because of its growing hardiness zones, it's something local that has like a tropical feel to it. And to me, it does taste like a cross between a banana and a mango. And it does have that texture that's more banana custard-like, in my opinion. But it's a very tasty fruit. A lot of the marketing and the uses for pawpaw, like in mainstream, because it's something that doesn't have a very long shelf life. And I think a great example was used by one of the speakers at the conference from OU. And he was talking about the banana, right? And the banana will mature with ethylene. And there's a point in time where it's receptive to ethylene, but it's not actively producing ethylene. So you harvest a banana, and it ships green, it ships hard, it doesn't bruise, it can travel, it can go for days. But it's at the stage where once it's where it needs to be, you basically introduce it to ethylene and it matures off the tree. And we've talked a lot about that and how that can change the flavor, but that does help with cultivation and shipping. So the pawpaw, it will not be receptive to ethylene as much as the banana is. So if you plug it too early and you try to mature it off the tree, it doesn't work. So now you're left with the fruit maturing on the tree. So when you pick it at the point of ripeness, it's only going to be good for 48 hours, 3 days tops.
Yeah, they get squishy fast.
And then it's goo. It's like, how are you going to really ship it? How are you going to distribute it unless it's local?
And they're also, one of the biggest problems with pawpaws is the pests out there. So not necessarily like insects and diseases, but when you talk about, the fuzzy ones like raccoons, trying to, especially if you're wild harvesting, trying to get to the pawpaws before the raccoons do means that you're harvesting them green. There is no way to find a ripe pawpaw before the raccoons do. They really love them.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, as far as a disease management for the plant goes, so the tree is fairly disease resistant. And I mean, other than the bucks rubbing up on them, the deer aren't going to like nip at those either. They're going to eat the fruit. But like the tree is pretty much left alone. A lot of the detrimental fruit diseases that we talk about, the fungal diseases, and we talk about the different spray programs that we do.
Right.
Pawpaws seem to be hardy, and from the plant disease management perspective, not a whole lot of input. But from the fruit perspective, yeah, you're going to be fighting raccoons and deer for those fruits that are only going to be good for a couple days.
Yeah. And so, that's like one of the things we've talked about in the past is when you look at what you find in the grocery store today, a lot of it is based on its shelf life, right? And whether or not it can be shipped okay and keep inside the grocery store. And so when you look at some of these more native varieties, more heritage plants, then we're looking at this much shorter shelf life. But Dan, can you tell us a little bit about what the Ohio Pawpaw Growers Association is doing to help with marketing so that these pawpaws can actually make it into a final product?
Well, the association obviously wants to promote pawpaws as a positive, enjoyable experience. Just get the information out there. And here's the thing about the pawpaws, right? We just talked about how finicky it is to get a good tasting pawpaw in a roundabout way. Like, it's only ripe for 3 days. If you eat it too early, it's not going to taste good. And there's not a whole lot of information out there about that. We're talking about it, but it had to be taught to me, and I had to read some literature about it. And it's not something that I see every day. It's just not well known. What is a good pawpaw? So, like, imagine you're somewhere with your friends and you see a pawpaw tree, and there's an old man there, probably me in a few years, saying, "Oh yeah, those are delicious, kids. Eat them." And you grab it before it's mature and you bite into it and it tastes terrible, right? The information's not out there about when should I eat this? What's the best way to market this fruit so that people can enjoy it? People can use it. So the association is helping with that, and honestly, so is the research. The research is going into that about quality control. Like, what is the time that you should eat these things, and how should you eat it? How should you prep it? There is some misinformation out there as well, but they're looking into it. They're examining, the different compounds that we talk about associated with fruits, and it is a FDA approved food. So there obviously is some quality control as far as safety goes. But the quality control in terms of a positive experience is kind of the main focus of the associations, of the research at this point at some level, and also processing. Because of that short shelf life, even if you were to take the pulp out, you have to process the pulp. There's a lot of large seeds in there. The skin of the pawpaw is not the easiest thing to remove. So even in post-harvest processing, like removing the skin from the fruit itself, they're looking at blanching the fruit to get the skin off quicker, cutting it in half and scooping in the insides, and then you're dealing with the seeds. Food processors that will remove the seed along with giving you clean pulp. That stuff, that also has to make some strides in order to get it really mainstream and as far as a quality product out there that's easily accessible to a lot of people. And that's a big part of it as well. It's just not an easy fruit to cultivate and disperse in the food chain like a lot of the stuff that we're used to, like apples and bananas and pears and peaches. So it's not marketed the same way. So a lot of the smaller scale producers, just to give people kind of that taste, to understand about what it comes from, a lot of the breweries are buying frozen pulp. So, in that 3-day period, if you can process it, make the pulp and freeze it, there are buyers out there that want to utilize it just, from a niche perspective. People want to try this stuff, and people like beer, and pawpaw beer just seems to do well. It's a local tree. Its growing area kind of spans from Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, up into the New York area, but it seems to like the river valleys. It seems to like the lakes.
Well, so pawpaws really like that deep forest, loamy soil. They want a lot of organic material in their soil. They're typically found where it's well drained, slightly acidic, but they can't have a lot of setting water in the soil because they have a super deep taproot, which Dan has found out as he's growing them in a nursery situation. But there are 13 varieties of pawpaw that grow in the United States, and 11 of them grow in the South. So they grow in like Georgia, Florida, and in those nice warmer climates. They are a different pawpaw than what we have up here, which is Asimina triloba. So those 11 species and the Asimina triloba do not overlap in their area. So they're different plants and they have different characteristics. But so the one we're talking about is Asimina triloba, which is our local pawpaw tree. It'll grow to be between 11 and 25 feet tall. So it's not a big tree. So if you're growing a tree under a power line, it's a great tree for that. But they do have fruit. So you do have to recognize that it will drop. But like we've said before, the critters are going to eat most of it. And it'd be amazing if you had a mess from it just because the critters like it so much. But the weird thing about pawpaws, too, is they're not pollinated by your typical bee pollinators, right? So they're more commonly pollinated by beetles and some mammals. And so it's the way the flower is structured is it's a really neat looking flower, but it does kind of have this prehistoric look to it. So they developed alongside these beetles, and that's what typically will pollinate them. And a pawpaw plant can't pollinate itself. It needs to have pollen from a separate tree, much like an apple does. And so it's really important to make sure that you have more than one tree, but also recognize that pawpaws grow in clonal colonies. So just because you have 20 little pawpaw trees in one little area doesn't mean you have 20 trees. You have one tree that has 20 stems.
That's absolutely right. And honestly, Karen, the whole thing about the self-pollinating incompatibility thing, that's something that's still being researched. I know a lot of people do kind of go that route, and that a lot of the research kind of indicates that, but that's something we're still looking into.
That's true. Yeah, we're still learning on that.
It's just such a novel thing, and that's why we're doing the research, and that's why we're trying to figure out the quality control and the best management practices for growing them. Like the deep taproot thing, that wasn't known. I don't know in the past. I'm not going to put a number to it, but
right. And
just a lot of stories, hey, this worked for me, and I don't see it fruiting, so this must be what's going on. A lot of that stuff, a lot of that stuff can be correct, like some observations in the past, but the research does help because it could be a cultivar thing, like Karen was saying. Like there's slightly different species of pawpaws out there that are similar but not really the same thing.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking pawpaws, she was absolutely right. I was talking about the
Asimina triloba.
The Asimina triloba, right? Not the tropical one in the South because, well, I'm not in the South and I just hadn't been exposed to it. So,
well, yeah, and that just goes back to making sure that you are purchasing local cultivars wherever as close to you as you can. So when you're buying plants from a nursery, you want to buy the plants from a nursery that is close to you, because that way you are more likely to get a cultivar that is happy with your region. So recognize that if you were to go online and order a pawpaw from some random online nursery, you don't know where that nursery is necessarily located. And if it's in Florida and they're shipping it to you here in West Virginia or Ohio or any of our listening area, that may not be the right cultivar for your area or even the right species, right? So you have to make sure, or at least as best you can, try to buy your new plants from a local nursery that propagates them there. So that way you know that you're getting a plant that's going to do well in your region.
That's right. And certified nursery is always recommended because there is a disease control aspect of any plant, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
Certified nurseries are, and I'm sure Karen is very happy that I'm bringing this up, will help kind of curb some bad stock out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So pay attention to what you're getting for sure. But when you're looking to buy a pawpaw tree from a nursery, you want to recognize that you do still have to protect, even though they do produce chemicals that make them unpalatable for deer. We all know that the deer, especially in this region, will eat pretty much anything. So make sure you're protecting your babies at least until they're over maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall. So keep them guarded so that they can have enough reserves in their roots. So if they do perhaps get mown down by a deer or a lawnmower, that they can come back.
But Karen, it might not be the deer. I mean, it very well could be because, a deer has to learn that it doesn't like something, right? And there's a lot of deer out there. So sometimes if you're trying to get an orchard started and you got a bunch of small plants, well, all it takes is as many deer as plants, even though they don't like them, to ruin.
Taking 2 bites and knocking the top out, yeah.
However, I'm telling you, things like rabbits don't seem to care. Rabbits will just nip it literally in the bud, and they'll decapitate it. And what I've observed with pawpaws is that even if that happens, you don't want it to happen because that's obviously going to slow the rate of growth and that's going to cause stress. But that deep taproot, there's just a lot of reserve there, and some of these plants that even the ones that I've been growing that I've just kind of said, well, this thing is it's looking a little rough. I don't think it made it throughout through the winter. You'd be surprised. Like they break like a lateral bud in there and right at the soil line, and they just kind of keep growing. So don't. I guess my thought behind that comment is be patient with it. I mean, it's a fairly resilient tree. You have to handle it a certain way. That taproot is very vital. We do know that. So make sure if you're buying it, you're getting it in deep containers that can accommodate a taproot. When you're transplanting it, you are gentle with it. You're not just smashing it in there and destroying that taproot. Because what happens with that too is when you damage the taproot, and Karen can correct if I'm wrong, but it also introduces diseases from the inside up.
Right, because you've created a wound.
So it kind of starts killing the root. And even though like the pawpaw tree can withstand a break or a bite, let's say, it might not withstand a dead root. I don't think any tree will.
Right. And so, those deep containers are really going to be critical because you all have seen a potted plant where the roots have started. We've talked about those in the past. The roots will start curling around and going around in a circle. Once that taproot bends to the side, it will not straighten back out really. Well, I mean, it will and it won't. But if it's really growing in a circle, if it's just got a slight bend to it because it's been in the pot a little too long, that's okay. But if it's growing in a circle and you have to cut it off to get it to go straight down again, you're really putting that plant back a long ways. So it's important to get those tall pots. If it's a skinny pot, that's not as big of an issue as to if it's a short pot when you're looking at pawpaws especially. So you want a long pot, and you want to make sure when you're putting that taproot in the ground that you're digging the hole deep enough so that the root grows straight down, that you're not curving it when you put it in a hole that's a little too shallow, because once it starts curving upward, then you basically have put it back in a pot. So you want to make sure that your hole is deep enough to get that root to grow straight down. In forestry, when we're doing plantings, of hundreds of trees at a time, that's a common problem if a tree gets put in a hole that's not deep enough. It's called a J root, and it'll grow upwards instead of downwards. And we don't want that for your pawpaws or any tree, really.
Right. and that also happens with Christmas trees quite a bit. And, that can happen with taproots, right? So be aware of that. Just always try to work the soil below planting depth, but also don't plant it too deep either. So if you have questions about planting, you can call your extension office wherever it is, and I'm sure they'll be happy to help you out. But one other thing about the root is just because the tree doesn't grow very tall, and we say no, it's you could put it under something, maybe it won't affect the power lines too much, but those roots, they even as delicate as we're trying to make them, they can work their way into some pipes and some
That's true.
foundations and stuff like that. So if you are planting them, I would also recommend. And remember, we were talking about the pawpaw patches, right? How it sends up the water sprouts from the roots all over the place, and that kind of relationship kind of makes it spread. And the pawpaw does kind of spread underground and have the similar genetics all above ground. So knowing that, planting it too close to the house can make it a very big nuisance.
Yes.
So if you are planting it,
not a house yard, not a yard plant, really.
Plant it away from the house, plant it away from septic systems and things like that, because it does like to find its way into things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, did you guys talk much about grafted pawpaws at the conference?
Yes, we did. So there are some established cultivars out there. The cultivars don't typically root well, so you can't just take a cutting and root it directly from the cutting and plant it into the ground. What you'll have to do is basically take a rootstock, which would be a wild pawpaw tree, and if you want a specific cultivar, you basically graft it onto a rootstock. So you'll take 2 pawpaw plants, take the scion, the top from one, and you'll cut the scion off the rootstock of the wild tree, and you'll graft them together so that the roots are wild and the scion is from a cultivar. Now that scion, so the top of it is the part that's going to produce the fruit, that the quality that makes it a cultivar. So a lot of the larger scale orchards are kind of going that route for propagation. They're finding that certain cultivars that have been established that somebody found that used to be a wild plant are producing fruits more consistently. They're producing fruits at a size that is desired. And, just the people that have a positive experience with pawpaws and really like them, that does something to the price. Because when there was a producer panel up there discussing prices of pawpaws, we were talking anywhere from $10 a pound and up.
Wow.
I mean, it's a profitable endeavor, and it's a native fruit. It's different. It's unique as far as what we're used to. So the demand is there, and things tend to balance out as supplies grow and demand dies down, I guess. But currently, people are having a lot of good success with it.
Yeah, and I encourage you, if you've never tried pawpaw anything, to go out and try some pawpaws. Let's help keep that demand up for our production, and also this is a great crop that you can grow in forest farming endeavors, because they do prefer a little bit of shade, especially when they're young, and so they're great production in forests. So forest farmers, pawpaw is a good option for you. But we need you all as consumers to go out and try something new, push yourself to try something different, and let us know if you try pawpaw something or other, what you think of it. Do you like it? Or, is it just meh? We want to know. So give us a holler. You can reach out to us at our local extension offices, Dan in Belmont County, Ohio, and me in Ohio County, West Virginia. So we look forward to hearing from you, and thanks again for listening. Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.